Hey guys, this is Valde from OG here. Danish Counter-Strike is one hell of a drug, but so is Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm going to intentionally, obviously, put this interview out once you join the new team and you're out of OG and all that. So I want to basically ask, don't worry, obviously I won't release this before, but so I want to ask a few questions that will touch on the OG management or what their philosophy was or what their choice was. Because the problem is, Valde, I mean, you know this, we've directly talked about it in the past. The problem is this, basically. Because OG, you hear the name OG and everyone thinks of Dota 2 and they think of TI8 and TI9 and the ones that they won and all the millions of dollars. I think genuinely, I'm not joking, mate, a lot of fans naively think OG, the team, is like No Tail's Scrooge McDuck fucking vault of money, and that he actually comes out with his own money in a bag and pays Valde every month and Issa, and like, I think they almost think that, mate. And the bizarrest part about the idea they think that is they then think that means that the No Tails of the world, who obviously by the way aren't the ones doing this, they also then think he would spend loads of his own money. Like they think he's got the millions, so they're like, why doesn't he sign like Simple? And that's like, okay, this is the craziest scenario, but obviously to bring it back to reality, it's a team, and when you run these teams, you don't run it to spend your own money, you run it to get investment in and then to spend it correctly, and the idea is it's a business, right? So even though the OG brand is connected to the Dota 2, obviously that's all like, that's just fans going off into fan logic like a motherfucker. But in this team, the reason why I feel like unfortunately it did set up the team to be in an awkward spot is because a mixture of the fact that you launched with big names like Aleksib and NBK and you, and then the fact that people know the OG thing, I genuinely think fans thought, right, well, as soon as this team has any problems, they'll just go and sign really big players. Like maybe they'll sign like Nico or something like that. Where's like the real Nico, not the other one, mate. Sorry, like the one with the capital K, obviously, because later you did sign the one with the lowercase K, of course. They think you're going to sign superstar players. Well, sadly, I always had the suspicion of like, I don't think that's even on the table. Like, as far as I can tell, I've never heard this team connected in a rumor with one of those players. I've never even heard that they want to spend, but like I've never even heard behind the scenes any of that stuff. And then also, similarly, I heard when some of you guys would maybe look elsewhere, they also maybe wanted big buyouts. So it sounded like it's a bit of a tough spot in that regard, because where the team was in terms of the results we're talking about, I feel like that's almost like the top end of what you call like the min-max. Like they didn't spend too much money to get that. They got some good results. But the problem is, if you're trying to be efficient, you can't spend big then, because you spend big, it's not guaranteed you win. Plus you have to have the money. You have to get people to come. So essentially, this is the question. If we look at the results on paper, in the spring of the next year, in 2021, so last year, that would be the time where there's two moves you do. Either you do re-up and you get some big name players, they come to OG, you got, the core stays there, and you go for the top. You just go for the number one, and we're going to spend big. Obviously, the org didn't do that. Instead, you guys re-signed, and initially it was just with the same squad. So give me your thoughts on that. Like, why re-sign? Were you thinking to yourself, like, the same lineup can succeed? Did you want them to get more players? Where were you at that person time when you signed? Because obviously, like at the time, whatever you were thinking, I'm sure you might have a different perspective now because it's been a while and you obviously haven't played in a long time. Maybe it could be seen as maybe you took the wrong route on that one. What would you say to that period of time?
Yeah, like first of all, I do want to say that a lot of what you just mentioned about OG is like pretty true. I do want to say though, when they made the original team, I actually feel like they spent quite a good amount of money. They had to buy me out from North. They had to buy Aleksi from ENCE, I guess. They had to buy NBK from his Vitality contract, I believe. And then maybe like Isa and Mantu was a little bit cheaper, but still, they actually did spend a good amount of money for the starting five back then. But then after that, obviously, maybe they didn't have unlimited amount of spending like some other teams do, or at least like it feel like they do. But yeah, when we re-signed the contracts, we were in that state where we felt like we could take that next step if we could make like one more good roster move or whatever. And I still feel like we did decent enough where like OG as an organization is a really good organization to be a player in. They don't interfere that much with the team. There's some great guys in the management, that sort of thing. So I just feel like we all had like a pretty comfortable time. And then obviously it was during like the whole COVID era, right? So I feel like just having a job and being able to just like play esports, earning a salary, stuff like that, also counted in our minds, because as you saw in like different sports, some people are really unlucky that they like straight up lose their job or they can't even play the sport or whatever. So I felt like we were pretty grateful for the fact that we could actually play online from our rooms, even though it sucked, not being able to attend a boot camp or whatever. So I think it was a matter of being just having a home and feeling safe like financially and like just like team wise, just being able to play on a team, as I mentioned before. And then obviously I also enjoyed playing with some of the guys, like we had a great time. So that was kind of the idea. And also like for me personally, I didn't really get the chance to join Astralis back then for different reasons. So yeah, that was basically my logic to resigning.
Right, obviously, as I've said there, that was a period where you could have re-signed or you could maybe have gone elsewhere. You stuck around for the next year, though, right? How would you describe the next year? Because the problem is the first year in OG, as much as the online period's a problem, at least there's good results. There's periods where things are going well and you can hope for it. The problem with the lineup after this, the one where you brought in Nico with the lowercase k, who obviously you'd played with in North back at the Stockholm run, and then Flames came in, the Israeli player, right? Listen, the problem with this team is this. Like, I can see what the logic is. Like, for example, if Flames, like fellow countryman Spinks, had like a breakout year like he had this year, then that team could have done all sorts of things. He would have been like the firepower you need and stuff. But like, what went wrong with the second lineup, would you say? Why did it seemed like it just stalled a bit? It wasn't even that it was terrible, it just stalled. You never really got any going,
Yeah. I mean, that's the feeling I got as well. I think the breaking point for me was probably during the winter when we lost Aleksi to G2, because he was obviously like the only one alongside me who was actually a part of the original OG lineup, like even before Mantu came. So I felt like when we lost him, we kind of lost our direction as a team. And when a team doesn't have an in-game leader, at that point in time, by the way, I didn't even know we could get Nexa. So
right.
That was like, I had a really hard time seeing like, what's the...
Oh, you thought maybe the team's just dead or something?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, what's the vision for the team? Like,
right.
What if somebody else leaves? Like, what if Mantu leaves? If he gets a good offer, am I just stuck on this island alone? So that's the kind of thoughts I had in my mind. And then, yeah, obviously not qualifying for the major, I think, was like the death blow for me, because then I don't know. I just felt like the team was going nowhere. Basically, I couldn't really see what we should do to improve. I feel like we kind of tried everything. And at that point in time, I was the only one with. I was basically the only one from the original starting five, maybe alongside Manto if you want to bring him in as well. So I just feel like when you're on a team for that long, 2.5 years almost, everybody else left you or went somewhere else. Then it's a little bit rough, and yeah, not qualifying for the major kind of was like the final nail in the coffin for me.
So here's the question then. Right, I've alluded to this in the past because obviously I do buy the numbers in the past almost weekly, and if you know that show, we do mention on that show if we're hearing rumours behind the scenes. In fact, I always say this to fans, the difference between it, if the spoiler is, if someone was breaking news, it wouldn't be on By the Numbers, would it? It'd be on like Richard would do an article. So if we say on By the Numbers, I heard this, it just means it's a rumour. We just heard, behind the scenes, could be a legit rumour, could be not one. We usually say that, right? I heard a rumour around this time, 2021, and obviously people will know in 2022 it was even reported by the press. Like, there's a couple of times Valde could have joined Astralis, maybe. Now, true, when I say Astralis, I don't mean like, you wouldn't be like next to Device, Dupree. Obviously, this would be like the essentially reworked ones, a bit like what they've got now, similar kind of squad now. And obviously, most recently, there was a very big story actually where it's weird because I'm the one who said it on the show, which caused the story. But I had heard from a very legit source that, like, not only might Device to be in Astralis again, but Valde's going as well. And that's, they're just going to get them all. They're going to do the deal with OG. It's going to happen. Right? Can you just give us, what would you say to this? If I just put it to you, has Valde had chances to join Astralis? Do you regret it? Should you have done it? What do you think on this topic? What would you say?
There was chances, basically, and there's been actually several chances at this point, but it's never been my decision not to go. That's basically how I want to phrase it. I don't want to go into like any specific details. That can probably come at a later point if we do an interview. At some later point in time. But I did have chances, but for different reasons. Probably like the main one being like contractual reasons. It never ended up happening, and I guess that's all there is to say. about it.
Like, here's the problem. You seem like such a fucking well-balanced, like, well-rounded person. I'm sure you just fucking meditate for 5 minutes and a fucking snack bar and then just felt, oh, life's still going on. So you maybe were okay with it, but that might torture some people. Like, put it this way, I'll tell you right now, if I was to, like, bring into the call now, like, config, of course he would tell you, he looks back, like, what the fuck was I thinking with that Astralis interview? Like, I should have just joined, like, my career could have gone so. I'm sure, you know, for some people that'd be a big deal. Do you ever think about it? Does it matter? Does it bother you?
It does, yeah. Obviously it does. I think you might actually overrate me a little bit in that sense.
I'm being a bit for comedic purposes, obviously, yeah, come on.
Yeah, obviously, like, I think, you know, I feel like I'm a guy who thinks a lot, you know, like, so yeah, obviously you do think as a player, like, what would have happened if I joined this team? Like, could I have been the piece that could have helped them and they could have helped me in becoming, like, a trophy-winning team, right? So of course you have that. Of course you have those kind of thoughts, especially when it's a team you're so close to joining, like on multiple occasions. But yeah, at the end of the day, you know, it didn't end up happening, and yeah, I don't know what more I can say to that, other than I actually do think about it sometimes, like what would have happened if I joined Astralis at those points in time. But yeah.
This is just a really simple question. It sort of ties into the OG topic before. If I just look from the outside at how many times I've seen OG players involved in rumours of going to other teams, but then I look how many they've actually sold to like bigger and better teams, and basically it's Aleksib as far as I can tell. And that took quite a while, if you remember. The rumour for that was way before, that was months and months and months and months before this deal got done. I heard it was like back and forth. So my question basically is this, is it difficult to get sold by OG? It feels like they really want a good price for the big pieces they had, right?
I think all organizations, you know, when they have a good player and people wanna buy them, obviously they want their share. But yeah, I have no idea how the Aleksi deal went actually with G2. Like, you know, I'm not a part of that process. But for me, you know, I was at different points in time, you know, you do get a little bit frustrated when there's an offer that passes by you and you're kind of like a bystander. You can't really do anything, you know, it's up to the higher powers at that point in time. So yeah, that's some of the stuff you gotta live with as a player. And I think it also made me, you know, learn some stuff about the behind the scenes part of the scene, where you really gotta think about the contracts you go into, the length of those contracts, when it's expiring, when is it smart to renegotiate, like all that kind of stuff is something that can have like a enormous impact on your career. Because a lot of that stuff is kind of like out of your hands once you actually do have the contract. And then it is up to like, is your organization willing to sell you? Like, even if they are, is the other organization willing to pay the buyout? Like all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, that's a tricky thing about being a professional. And I think that's also a big reason why many people are getting like agents nowadays to like help players with that kind of stuff.
I mean, maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because the question I have would be like this. The problem I think that the esports pros have is, like, not only has no one ever done a scene like this before, but we don't even have, like, especially in CSGO, like, I'll give you the difference. In League of Legends, they have actually almost, it's just like football, mate. You know, there's the season and then there's like an off-season part, and you're not even allowed to, like, sign people unless their team agrees to you let you talk to them before. Kind of like football, you know, but then the off-season part, once the day begins that the trade window opens, you know, everyone's on the phone calling Ronaldo and Messi and all the players. Yeah, it's the same way, right? But the point is, the good thing about that is it sort of lets everyone know this is the part of the portion where you play, this is the part where you do business. In CSGO, half the problem is everyone's contracts run different lengths, they run out at different points in time. People don't, of course, because when they're doing it, time these contracts to end on player breaks or after majors. In fact, I've even heard of contracts, by the way, where they would end like a month before a major because you just couldn't know when you signed the contract. So sometimes it even puts the team in a tricky spot like that. You might fuck the team, obviously. So the part of the problem, I feel like, if you're a pro, is it's not like sports where you just watch what the other guys do. You have to kind of figure it out for yourself. So some of the dynamics you're talking about are very tricky if you're young. Like, I'll give you an example. The best time, obviously, to leave a team is when you're at your peak in a team. But the problem with that is that's also going to be where they're probably going to be super lovely to you and tell you everything. Oh, stay, like, you'll be so good and we'll buy extra pieces. And you might go, oh, okay, cool, because at the time you've got the power, right? Problem is, if in 6 months you're having a slump, Suddenly some of those teams aren't as nice to you, the teammates aren't as nice, they don't give you and sometimes then when you want to leave, when you're in a slump, now the buyout's too much, or now no team wants you. Like, it's tricky, right? It's tough. Essentially what you're constantly having to figure out is, like, am I in or out at this moment? And I think it's hard to judge from the outside, dude. It must be tough as a player.
Yeah, it's super tough. And I think, as I said before, a lot of it is random as hell. You know, like, when you signed that 2-year contract, like, you have no idea how the scene looks like. I always say something funny to like my friends and family when they ask me like, you're gonna like, cause you know, my own family as well. They when you're on the bench, you know, they ask you as well like, who are you gonna play for? All this kind of
Sure.
that. And I always tell them like, every time in esports when I'm thinking like, where do I want to be, or like where do I think I'm gonna be in 1 year from now? It's never the place where you actually are the year after, you know what I mean? So I just learned after this many years in the business that you have no idea what the future is going to hold. Like, you know, if people told me in North, okay, like in 1 year from now, you're going to be on like OG with like NBK, Aleksi, all these people who you like don't really know, never played with me before, or never played with before, I would have just told them like, you're crazy, right? Like, it's not going to happen. So yeah, I think that's also part of why it is so hard, because like esport is a little bit random. Like, results are sometimes random. Timings for when the other teams are changing, like, you have no control or knowledge about that whatsoever. So sometimes you just gotta make the decision which makes the most sense for you right in this moment, and then that can end up burning you, you know, like in the long run. So yeah, it is super hard, and I think it's probably never going to be perfect. So a lot of it is just going to be random and timing, good timing, I guess.
The other story that people obviously will have heard, because this was actually like, maybe people have forgotten it now, but I don't, which was that you were supposed to be the 5th player of Evil Geniuses. Now, I will say, obviously we're doing this interview when we sort of know how that one went. But at the same time, I would say this to fans. I don't think it would have been identical if Valde joined. But the problem is this. Listen, I'm sure it'd be great for them if you joined. I don't know if it'd have been as great for you. Was that a move that was really, like, basically, if the business parts had gotten taken care of, would you have been in EG? Would you have been in that team?
Probably would, yeah. I probably would. But as you said before, you know, it wouldn't have been the same roster. It would have been different. But I think the main, like, I think the tricky part with EG, as far as I understand it, is that they want to play in the NA minor. And if you want to play in the NA, or not the minor, like the major qualifier, right?
RMR, yeah.
Yeah, RMR. Then you got to have a majority of NA players, right? So you're always going to be restricted to 2 European players. And since they already have Zerg, for example, he counts as a European player, even though he lived in NA for the past 5 years or whatever, right? So I think that, and I think they even tried to get him verified as like, verified as a NA player. But then it comes down to like, how do you define an NA player? Is it where he lives? Is it if he has like a NA passport? You know, like how do you define an NA player, right? And since they couldn't make that puzzle go up, it basically didn't end up happening. And then on top you had the contractual stuff. So yeah, I probably would have played in EG, but again, at the time, you know, I had to make a decision for myself. And, you know, Aleksi just left the team and I was kind of left alone, wondering like what I should do. And of course, you know, I tried to consider other options as well, but I think that was like the best I could manage back then. And yeah, I guess that's it.
As I said, I actually feel like part of what's rehabilitated you as like a prospect that people want to see in top teams like Astralis, Evil, and obviously people don't meme too much. Obviously the org is Evil Genius is a top org. Like, you know, these are the reason why people actually have considered you in the sort of roster mania for these moves. If you notice, like I said at the beginning of the interview, it's because I feel like people now define you. This is why they want you in Astralis. They just see you as like the new Zipnix. Have you noticed that? Like, the vibe's supposed to be, what you're supposed to be is, by the way, this is what Zipnix did, if people don't know. He was someone who was a top prospect who could have been a totally different type of player. Like, I don't know about star player, but he definitely would have been a fragger. Like, he was a good player. So because he then like chose to embrace that role of being a supportive element, but I would always say what made him legendary to me was, like NBK, because they could have done other roles, they were way more skilled than you should be normally in those shit roles. Like, normally those are the roles people don't want and that you give to the low skilled player. And the joke is you tell him, instead of telling him frag people, you tell him don't die. It's like the opposite task, right? So if people like you come along and you can actually do it and be skilled in it, that makes you a very valuable sort of like X factor piece in the team, right? So what I want to ask basically was do you actually like the way this has been characterized? Was that was that circumstances of the teams? If you had your way and you were in a top team now, would you like to be a star player, someone who's played around? What's your vision of yourself as a player?
I feel like I've always said this. I don't mind being a supportive player if it's on the right team. I think that's what it comes down to for me. If the team is so skilled, so they just need a player who can anchor the sides, maybe help a little bit with the secondary calling. I'm always going to give my opinion. I feel like I'm really good at like the team play aspect, offering nades, stuff like this. Then I actually don't mind playing those supportive positions. But if I'm on a team where I feel like I contribute more into like the star player roles, where you play more of the impact spots, stuff like this, then I probably feel like I still prefer that. So I guess it depends on the team, basically. That's how I feel.
Okay. Right, obviously, people might notice, even though for the Danish teams, I asked immediately about the IGLs, I saved Aleksib until now, because I actually think with the timing of when this interview will come out, obviously, in theory, his stock is at its lowest, unfortunately, because he's been removed from G2, and obviously people think it's because, like, whether it's true or not, they think it's because the people like Nico and the rest of them just don't think he's good enough, or he doesn't fit their style, or whatever. What I want to ask is this. He's actually in IGL where I have the unique position, as I've mentioned many times. I actually twice got to listen to your guys' comms, because I heard you at Blast, because we had the Blast comms. So that was at the beginning of the team. And then I heard you in the Flashpoint period, because we obviously had the comms there too. So unlike a lot of other players, I'm not speculative. I've actually heard these Sky call games. And listen, obviously I have my own opinion. I think he's fucking legit as fuck, mate. Like, as I told people, I think I did a tweet like this at Flashpoint too. I just said, like, Aleksib is the truth. Like, when I listened to his comms, he seemed like he really had, like he's one of those IGLs that looks like he has the wall hack and just knows what the other team's doing, and that's like the patterns in his mind. Like, give me your thoughts on when you played with him. What is Aleksib like as an IGL?
I think it's pretty true what you said. Like, he has a really good mind for the game. When he's in his zone, he's really good at reading the opponents. He's really good at deciding what strats is the best for this specific round. But I always feel like one thing that's a little bit overblown is the micromanagement aspect. Obviously, I do agree. Like, we probably didn't have the most vocal team back then. We had like Isa on the team who didn't maybe say too much. Mantu maybe didn't say too much. So obviously, like, if we have a 3-on-3 situation where Aleksi is dead, for example, and he's like spectating, if nobody is saying anything, then obviously, like, he feels like the round is probably going to be lost if he doesn't like interfere and jump in and starts like micromanaging. But I don't think it's because he wants to micromanage as an in-game leader, Like, let's say he had 4 players, like 3-4 players who could actually talk a lot on their own. I don't think he would do this micromanagement style. So I really think it depends on the players he has. And I think because people heard that 1 or 2 rounds where he actually did the micromanaging, then people made it up as though he's like only doing micromanaging, and
they made it sound like that's his style and he wants to do that. Yeah, whereas I always got the vibe as well. He's doing that because it's Issa. He's not going to say that to Nico. There's no way he's telling Nico that.
Yeah, and he didn't say that to me because he knew I was always gonna talk about like what I'm seeing on the map. I'm gonna do my part. So I feel like he only does it if he sees a player that's not communicating by himself, or he feels like he needs to interfere to have a better chance of winning the round. And I think that's totally legit, like I'd probably do that as well if I was the in-game leader. I think Kerrigan would do that as well, if you didn't have players who's talking. Of course you're gonna like try and make up a plan in the round or the clutch, right? So I think that was always like super overblown, and I actually think it made like, I think it hurt his reputation a little bit, maybe, that people think he's like one-sided in this aspect, that he's not able to call a little bit more freely. But in terms of what went wrong in G2, I actually have no idea. I think it's so hard to say from the outside when you didn't hear the comms and you don't know what's going on behind the scenes of a team. I think it's super tough to know exactly what went wrong. Like, it's so hard to calculate like how much of it is Aleksi's fault, how much it's like the management, like his teammates. It's so hard. It's probably like a mix of everything. I never think it's like only one person's fault if a team is not doing well, right?
Sure.
But yeah, I did enjoy playing with him. I think he's a super smart guy, has a really good mind for the game, as you said before. At times when he was in the zone and he was like confident in his own calling, it did feel like he had wallhack at times. He could make the perfect decision in a round where it just really feels good when you win those type of rounds, right? But yeah, in terms of what went wrong in G2, it's hard for me to say.
I wanted to ask you this though, at least in the first era, the one with NBK and ENCE and stuff, another comment I obviously made, which I understand. Listen, I get why if you're the player I criticise, you're not going to like it. Like, whether it's true or not, to hurt your feelings, I get that. But that's just who I am, and I'm going to fucking do it anyway, so tough shit. But the question would be this, right? Basic and spoiler, you always have the option to just play well on the server, then I can't say shit, can I? Although I'm pretty good at some of my stuff anyway, to be fair. So here's what I would say about that original era. Another criticism I brought up famously was that, like, I know this is why people think I'm like an XDB fan, mate, because it sounds like what you'd say to defend a player if you're a fan. It's like, well, I was hearing the comms, you guys didn't, and all the calls that were really good, he made those, and all the ones that were shit, they were like talking over him. It sounds like I make an excuse, right? But it's true, Valde. Like, dude, the amount of times in those games, right, like OG would be at like, you'd be down like 4-9 or something, and then people would be in the comms like, Aleksib wouldn't even have said anything in comms yet, and like NBK would be like, I think we should go on short, and then this would be like, I could run out long, just like run over the top of someone, and then you would be like, what if we instead, and then sometimes, no joke, the amount, this might have happened like once of best of 3, Aleksib would actually say in the comms like, everyone shut up, and then he would say something and that round would win, and I would be like, what's the dynamic in this team where like the guy's actually telling people, the joke is, people always say Nico was just saying that to Chris Jacobs, like Aleksib was actually having to tell people to shut up. Like, what sort of dynamic was in this team? Because on the one hand, right, I can't tell if that's like if he's like not being controlling enough that he lets people have too much space, or if people are overcrowding him, or like what was going on. How do you explain the OG dynamic in this regard?
I think it was a little bit of both, because like at times, let's say we're on fire and we're actually winning. I think at times, we definitely had maybe too many cooks in the kitchen. But it's probably also that he was not like assertive enough at times, or if he just zoned out for like 5 seconds in freeze time, which is like totally legit if he's actually trying to think like what he should call, then immediately like somebody else would take over or give input. So I think it was a little bit of both, and the dynamic, like I don't really know if we had one really. It was a little bit random at times. People were feeling confident, we were talking too much. And if the game was going bad, we were probably not talking enough. So yeah, I think it goes back to, I think I heard Snappi as well say this before, that it's probably like at least 20% easier to call if you call in your own mother language. Like, I think that would have actually made a huge difference. I know it sounds like weird, but let's say all of us in OG were like Danish or French, doesn't matter. I think we would have done way better, because we would have had better like team play and better communication, right? And I think that's still a thing where I'm actually willing to go back a little bit, because I remember when I joined OG the first year or so, I think it was on the HLTV Confirmed or whatever, people asked me like, does communication matter that much on international teams? And I think back then I probably answered something that I felt like it was getting a little bit overrated. Everybody knows the spot names in English at this point in time, but it's not about that very like simple communication, but because obviously like people play FPL and face it in English all the time. So people have no issues in terms of the spot names. It's more the very micro specific comms where it's just easier to explain where a guy is in your own language than it is in English. And then people maybe misunderstand it a little bit, or from their point of view, it's different. The classic example is if you have a guy on short on Mirage and you have a guy on Firebox, like on A side, right? Let's say the CT. So you have a CT guy on short Mirage and a CT guy at Firebox, and you have a T in connector, right? If the guy on A sees the guy in connector on the left side, then obviously for the short guy, he's on the right side. So you're saying like left side connector, and then the short guy is looking like left side connector, then the T strafes out, kills him, and then you're like, oh, what the fuck, But in Danish, I probably could have specified it, because I would have said like, where the plant is in connector or whatever, like somewhere where you don't necessarily have a spot name for it. So that's what I mean with like the microcomms, or if you need to explain something really fast, where your brain just like it just functions faster, in your own language in terms of like what's actually coming out of your mouth, right? So I think that's a perfect example of where comms can go wrong more often in an international team compared to in a national team where you speak your own language. So I think that was also a problem at times that we, did have a little bit communication issues.
Right, the other angle, obviously, the one last player I want to bring up from OG was obviously NBK, the most tenured, longest player of CSGO, won a bazillion trophies, was obviously had loads of teams he's been successful in. Right, in this squad, and also, let's be real, OG essentially was his team, if you know like the order of when people joined and why it was built. So, like, it sort of was his team. So, listen, it's always going to be rough if you get cut from your own team. So what I'll ask is this, Valde. People might know I'm obviously something of an NBK defender. I'd consider him a friend. I think he is mega. I think it's certain things about him are maybe a bit more nuanced than people realise. But I would even say this, right? To shade it in, to be fair to OG, I would actually suggest that part of the reason NBK himself came out and said that he's found out he's autistic and things, I think actually that reflection was spurred by this team, believe it or not. I believe he actually thought to himself, yeah, there is sort of a trend. All these teams I'm in, I do somehow eventually have a conflict with the in-game leader, or people think I'm too hard-headed or stubborn or whatever it might be, and the same thing ends up happening. And which, by the way, that's actually a sign of maturity that you actually like can reflect on your own life. So yeah, that maybe I have issues. So my question is this: as much as obviously, like, I don't know if I'm still kind of 50-50 as to whether he should have been caught or shouldn't. Like, he was a decent player. Maybe there's some issues. Was there a problem with stubbornness? Was there something there? Was there some sort of a clash? Was there some reason that was there an impasse that you reached, that you had to go one way or the other?
Yeah, actually, I think so, yeah. I think you explained it pretty well just here. I feel like NBK is a little bit like Anakin, when he's on his good side, he can be like a super valuable asset to any team. I think he's great on LAN, for example, in terms of like motivating the other players. He has a really good mind for the game as well. I think he's really good at like giving other people confidence in what they do. If people are a little bit nervous, just sidestep him when they're running into the bomb site, he'll just press fucking W and people will just follow him. So in that sense, I feel like he's a really good teammate. But he also does have, his problems with attitude and stuff. And I think he explained it pretty well in his tweet longer or whatever it was. So yeah, I think he can have a dark side, but if he's willing to work on it, I don't see why he shouldn't be able to play on a really good team again someday. Because I do feel like he brings a lot of value, and I think you could also see that from the previous teams he's been on. They've always been some kind of contender. They might not have been the best team in the world, but they've always been like a solid good team, right? And I think definitely like a part of why we became, like a top 10 team in the world was also because of Nathan. So yeah, I think he has his ups and downs, but so does everybody else. So it's not only Nathan.
Sure. Right, obviously, if you think where we started the interview and all the ups and downs, and I'd say with your career, you kind of said it earlier. Look, it's not that you're like cursed. It's just that essentially you have had a lot of moments where it's like, right, I have choice A or B, and it's actually almost impossible at this moment to know which is the right one. And fuck, it turns out I should have done A and I did B. Yeah. You've done B, in that scenario. There's a lot of times you zigged when you should have zagged. Just in hindsight, obviously. So the question, it's obviously a pretty simple one. It's a layup, but here you go. I have to ask it. You must be pretty hungry to fucking get back to the top now, though, right?
100%.
Or to get to the top for the first time, if you consider it that. Like, yeah, sounds like now's the time to kind of make your career what you want it to be.
Yeah, 100%. The period here in OG where I've been on the bench is probably the roughest period in my career. Because I had to think really good. Like, I had to basically make the hardest decision in terms of like, I know the next decision is probably going to be like the most impactful one in my career, right? And I just had to tell myself, like, now is basically the time where you go all in or you don't. Like, I don't want to like half-ass it and just like earn a salary, like blah, blah, blah. I really want to put 100%, 110% into the game, like grind as many hours as I can, put as much time into the game as I can. And still, like, I feel like I can still improve as a player and show that I have great potential. So yeah, I'm just hoping I can join a team where I can prove myself again and then hopefully lift the trophy someday. I think that's my biggest wish at the moment.
Right. obviously, this part of the interview towards the end, I mean, who knows how it'll age, because we're going to talk about something very topical now, but the team you will join now is going to be the ENCE squad, so you're going to re-team with Snappi again. So actually, just initially that aspect, like, how much was that a factor? Was he the guy who called you? Was he the guy who picked you up? Was it just happenstance that you're on the bench, they need a player? How did this come about?
Well, basically, I think it was a little bit mutual, after there was a spot left by Spinks on the team. I got in contact with ENCE, and as you mentioned before, it was definitely a big factor that Snappi is on the team. I think for me, just having that one guy on the team that and you can trust definitely makes like a big impact in terms of the decision of joining. And yeah, I think it just gets even better from the fact that we did actually play with each other before. But, it's such a long time ago, as we mentioned earlier, that he probably developed a lot as a leader and as a player. I probably did as well. So yeah, I think it was kind of a no-brainer for me. Obviously, ENCE has been doing amazingly the past 6 months. And I think I can probably also get back to a role where I'm a little bit more comfortable and where maybe I get to play a little bit more of the impact spots. So yeah, I'm super hungry to get going, and I think it's always pretty cool when you reunite with someone that you played with a long time ago. So I'm looking forward to that.
Right, obviously, the only tricky part about this question in the interview is I don't know when this is released. I mean, it's not official who the other fifth player will be and all that. So we'll just ignore that for the moment. But what I'll ask is this. I can still ask this question. The thing I think is very interesting about you joining this squad is that, first of all, on the one hand, I actually think like the expectations won't be there won't be too much scrutiny, in my opinion. Here's why. Because I actually think for a lot of people, Spinks was the main reason ENCE was at the top. Not the only one, but the main one. Like, he was the best player. He looked like one of the top 5 players in the whole world, which is crazy that an ENCE team could have that. So when this guy leaves the team, like, yeah, I'm sorry, like, people are going to think, well, it's the end of ENCE, who cares? But I actually think the fact that you're coming in, and then obviously the team's going to have to reconfigure in some way. This guy was the shit. I'm sure he had his best spots and was playing his best. Yeah, they're going to reconfigure some. I think in some ways it's a chance to make a totally new squad, though. So it must be like I think it's quite a sort of invigorating project, right? It's a new puzzle to solve.
That's how I feel like. That's truly how I feel like. Obviously, there's some big shoes to fill. I've been watching a lot of ENCE games as well, and I think Spinks has been like a super solid player, but I also think he's been set up like amazingly by his team. I think when they played, was it the Dallas event, when Spinks was not able to attend and they had Snacks, they made it to the final, and Snacks also played like pretty good individually, right? So I think that also speaks volumes to the fact that Spinks also had a lot of good positions, right? But yeah, I'm super hungry to prove myself again, and I do understand that there's big shoes to fill, but I can only put as much time into the game as I can, and then we'll have to at the end of the day, we have to prove ourselves at the big tournaments. So yeah.
Right, one of the interesting things about all team sports and team disciplines to me is that obviously you can have people where, depending on how their career goes, maybe individually they're good, but they don't always get the teams that they could have succeeded in and all the rest of it. So my question to you would be this. Obviously, when CSGO finishes, the Hall of Fame is going to have a lot of Danish players. It's going to have all great players and amazing, and maybe even people like Config who've been there, weren't on the Astralis of the world. Right, when everything's said and done in your career, Valde will be one of those names. True or false?
True.
Why?
I think I still have my best days ahead of me. I don't feel like I showcased what I can as a player yet. I didn't lift the biggest trophies. But at the end of the day, you need the right team for it. And I think that's what I found now. So I'm going to grind as hard as I can, and then I'll see you at the tournaments.
Who is a player? Because what's interesting is you've had an interesting bunch of players you played with. There's a lot of the Danish players you haven't played with. I'm amazed how many of the big names you've never actually been in a team with. So can you give me, like, is there one big name that you've never played with from the Danish scene that you just, either for whatever reason, you would have liked to have played with? Can you think of one that you'd pick out?
Probably Device. Probably Device.
What's the reason?
I actually, like, me and him actually don't know each other like too well. Like, it's not like we see each other every week in real life or anything like that. Like, we mostly spoke at events. I just feel like, you know, he seems like a great guy to be on a team with. You know, he's smart, makes good decisions, consistent. So I think he's probably the one. And also just the fact that he's like the best Danish player ever. I guess it's like a pretty good reason, right?
Someone make like a meme video where when he says device there, it pauses, then it's like that headline of like Thorin says device in Valde to Astralis, because that's obviously not happening, is it? So whatever. Joke's on me on that one, whatever. Listen, everyone gets tricked eventually. Actually, that was legit. What people don't know, that's actually something maybe we should touch on, Valde. Maybe I can ask you that question. One thing that is, I think, very complicated behind the scenes now is people still act like it's like 2015. It's like, if the roster move's happening, a load of these roster moves that you hear report and then never happens, sometimes both sides want it to happen, it just doesn't get the business done. Like, you know, people think they're all fake, like, oh, it was a lie or whatever. Like, some of these deals, like, it's true, some of them are like there's certain influencers saying moves that I know aren't ever even happening, or like, you know, someone DM'd someone once on Twitter and didn't get a reply. But there are deals, like, I'm sure in your case, like, these deals would have happened. Like, these weren't made up stories. Like, the sort of drama in CS is wild in that sense. It's more true than you realise.
Yeah, that's true. You know, a lot of the times, as you said before, both parties actually wanna make the deal happen, but for whatever reasons, probably like the contractual stuff, the financial stuff is probably like the biggest hindrance to some of those deals happening. And yeah, I guess that's just how it is nowadays in esports, where contracts are so big and there's a lot of money involved. I think that's just the way it goes. It's probably gonna get even worse, like in the future, right?
Oh, I've no doubt, yeah. Like, this is a tricky question, but I'll ask it anyway. If someone, for whatever reason, like, look, I assume if they watch this interview, they must have watched you play a bit in your career to watch a fucking 1.5 hour interview with you. But essentially, I always like to see if players have a good answer to this question. If I had to say to someone, go and watch this match, could be a final, could be like one map, could be an epic game you remember. If I had to say, like, this is who Valde is or what he can do in the game, what's like a great game you'd pick out in your career for someone to go and watch, and this will give them a sense of who you are as a player?
I think I would probably go for it was actually on North when I played with Cadian. We played, I believe it was ECS back with that, when that was a thing. We had a game against NRG, which was obviously like the old evil geniuses before they were called EG roster.
Oh, yeah.
We were playing Nuke, and I think we only got 3 or 4 CT rounds. And then people probably should know, like, okay, then you lost the game, right? But no, we didn't. And
you monstered it, I'm guessing? Did you want to make a game?
Yeah, that's when I did my 1v5. That's like pretty famous. I think that's probably like my best highlight ever. And I think that's a pretty good, like, you know, the shots or whatever in that round was nothing special, I guess. But yeah, I think it showcases pretty good how I am as a player. So I'd probably pick that one.
One thing I've noticed, right, I want to get your take on this, because I consider you like a skilled player. Look, like, you're not like fucking config or whatever, but you're pretty skilled for a player. If I watch you play, technique's good, you hit the headshot, etc. Here's the question I have, right? I've noticed there's a really interesting divide, where in CSGO, I'm sure part of it's they're trying to be cool, but if you ever watch those videos where they have like a really great player, watch like their best clips ever, like obviously ESL just did one recently with Yanko and Nico, for example. The joke is, the more amazing the player is, the more it really is just everyday for him. So the joke is when Nico's talking about it, he's doing like, you know, they're watching like clips that if you did like this with a Deagle, it'd be like the greatest round you ever did. But obviously it's Nico, so he's like, yeah, I think this one was online, so I don't know if it's really, you know, like they're just like downplaying it like a motherfucker. You're just thinking like, bro, like these are like the craziest clips ever. So my question to you is this, right? As a pro yourself, do you actually find like the really sick players, the Zewoos, the simple, do you actually find yourself ever like astonished, like, holy fuck, what the hell? Like, or does it just become commonplace eventually? Because, for example, like, maybe I've made it too extreme by picking like simple, etc. But I know why, for example, like a pro that's like at the bottom of tier 1, he's not really scared when he just plays like a really good, but just another pro. Like, you're just familiar with it, you know, that's the game, you play them each week. It's the really, really sick ones. Are they actually like on another level in your opinion?
I think they are, but like, as you just explained it before, like in this situation, you don't think about it. But I know you do those tweets sometimes where you just say, like, if you watch a simple highlight reel from just one tournament, that could probably be another pro's career highlight.
His whole career,
You know what
yeah,
I mean?
exactly.
And I think that just, I think that's a pretty good testament to how crazy good these people actually are. You know, like the Simples, Nico, Saiwu. I think Bit as well from Navi has some crazy highlights. If you go and watch some of his clips just from like streaming or whatever, like I think it's still impressive as fuck. So I would say like in the situation or when you're on the server with them, you don't really think about it. But you know, when you read a tweet like that, it sort of like puts things into perspective, right?
Yes. And the other one for me, a similar one I always say, is I think specifically for Nico, Ziwu, and Simple, we've got to stop acting like those numbers for the rating. Like, we've got to actually look at what the number says, because what people don't realise is this. When they keep telling me, like, Nico's having, like, a slump, I'll go and look, dude, and it'll be averaging, like, a 1.20 rating. It's like, bro, if Valde gets a 1.20 rating, that's going to be the greatest 3 months of his entire life. He's going to be like, I was on fire, I couldn't miss. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they got to know what relative, like, they're these numbers are. Like, you can't be telling me that guy's slumping in that.
I know what you mean. I remember. I remember as well. People said it for the. I think it was the spring final that Navi was playing. I was reading like a pimp tweet or whatever on Twitter, and the testament was kind of like that. Simple was kind of had a slow start to the tournament. But then after the tournament, because he did actually play like sort of a bad game against OG, like the first best of 3, and then I don't know, like a few days after the group stage is done, I just went and looked at the tournament.
Was he top rated?
I don't know. Wait, let me just check. Yeah, he was.
I bet he's in the top 3 or something. Yeah, go on.
No, he was the top rated even by like a far margin. And then I looked at the rating and it was like 137, and I'm like, all right.
No, exactly. Sure. Well, the thing is, though, there's actually a tie-on question here, though, which is that's also why, though, another thing that if you're a fan might seem frustrating is obviously all the young guns get hyped to the sky, right? Before they've even done it, they get talked about like they're going to be, like obviously everyone's really overused that thing of like the next Simple. Like we've had like 50 next Simple. The joke is we're waiting for the second one, but you guys say there's another one. Okay. When they do that, though, I know why they do it, though, Valde. It's because also when you've only seen the guy only in FPL or only in online scrims, for example, or only in like no pressure CS, there are loads of players where if there's no pressure can hit their peak, can hit their mad skills and stuff. They have real big talent. So here's a question I have for you. Is there someone in your career you would pick out where maybe as a pro he never got his credit, or maybe he never was like super great player, but like skill, you know, like raw ability, talent, or maybe without pressure? Is there someone you can think of who didn't get their credit, like they could have been a much better player? Someone's come to mind?
Yeah, there's actually someone who comes to mind. Like I don't know if I would say that he could have been like a better player, but just like pure skill wise, I actually think Mertz from the old North team was pretty skilled. Like just like pure individual skill. In practice, sometimes he'd do some crazy like Deagle highlights, USP aces, like crazy flicks with the orb. Like I'm pretty sure you can find some pretty insane clips from him. I think it's like different reasons that made him kind of fall off as a player. But just from like pure individual skill, he had some crazy highlights.
Sure.
But yeah, as you said before, in terms of the Simple angle, I think what makes Simple truly special is the fact that, like, just think about this. I think if you go to Simples like HLTV or whatever, like I was just there to check like that Blast group stage I mentioned before, like I need to scroll so my mouse almost breaks until I find like the first event where he has like a negative rating. It's like in Katowice 2017, and just think like we're in 2022 now. It's literally like 5 years where he doesn't have a single event that's like bad, right? And that's just crazy to me. That like that's probably the craziest stat ever, because I feel like everybody should have a bad tournament, just like every now and then, just like once every year or something, right? One tournament where like, I don't know, you're ill, or you only play like 2 best of 1s and then you go out. So maybe it's not even your fault, you know, you just had 2 best of 1s or whatever. So just the fact that he's able to play good for every single event for 5 years in a row is just fucking crazy to me. Like, it's just absolutely mind-blowing that he can, like, I think the best thing about Simple is that even if he has a slow start to the game, a lot of people would probably like lose confidence, or they'd be afraid of going for plays, but he just has some magical way of always finding his way into the game again, where he's able to come back from like a bad start or a couple of unlucky rounds or whatever. Like he always finds a way to have impact, and he always has like that one or two crazy rounds that pull his team over the line. You know, it's always him. And I think that's probably the reason why we'll never see someone like him again, because even Saiwu, you know, when he had the best player of the year for 2 years in a row, people were starting to argue like, is Saiwu the best one, or is Simple the best one? But I think now it's not even close at this point, right? And Simple played like many years before him. And I just think, yeah, it's so crazy. Like, Simple is truly one of a kind, if you ask me.
Indeed. Right. Towards the end of this interview, I obviously have the classic last question, which is, do you have a final message for people, or do you want to maybe shout someone out or say hello to someone?
There's no one in particular, but I actually do want to give a shout out to all the fans that's like stuck with me throughout the years. I think it's pretty crazy to see some of the fan dedication every now and then. You know, it even surprises me till this day. I still have some of I remember when I went to some of my first tournaments as a pro, all the way back before we were actually called Heroic, when we were called Team X. We went to China for a couple of tournaments back then, and I still have fans on Twitter from all the way in 2015 or 16 that writes me, you know, every now and then, good luck with your next team. You know, I can see they translate it from Google Translate, right? So it's like, no, but it's like, it's funny, but it's still hella cool, right? That these people literally follow your every move, and they're like huge fans. You know, they'll send me signed skins every now and then where it's like a fan skin where they want you to sign the weapon or whatever, right? And I think it's awesome to think about the fact that there's a guy on the other side of the planet that's like following your career, you know, your every move. When things are rough, you know, they'll send you like an encouraging message. So I just want to give a shout out to all the fans that's like stuck with you as a player throughout the years. Yeah, keep the messages coming, and I'll do my best to reply.
Yeah, tusen tak.
Tak, selv tak.
This video was kindly supported by Kill Your Inner Loser, Ahmed Hadjou, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Paul Villa, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Hades, Jensen Goh, Kovacevic, Pacey, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Toucan, and as always, special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Would you like to ask a question in my Patreon AMA? Maybe you want teasers, find out who the next Reflections guests are or upcoming talk show guests. Do you want to take part in one of those long donated discussions with me? Well, if any of the above or more sound interesting to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.